we go.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Abby. Abby literally saved my whole life this evening because I had an old meeting link and everything, and I'm just trash smoking in my car with my phone, and I was like, I don't have my laptop. Help me. Okay, well, as usual, we can just start with check-ins. I don't have any like fun check-in today because my brain is really, really off. So I'm just gonna say hang on. I'm gonna say let's just be radically honest with how we're showing up today. So for me, if I'm being really, really honest, I've been having a really difficult time with both mental and physical health stuff. In particular, I went about 3 days without my my meds because I had an issue with my pharmacy. So I just got them today and took them earlier, but I'm still feeling a little weird, and I'm incredibly brain foggy. So I expect there will be a lot of like slurring my words and forgetting my train of thought.
Well, you sound good to me, but
thank you.
I get it, and I'm sorry you're going through that.
So that's how I'm showing up, but I'm really excited about this conversation. So yeah. Reed, how are you showing up today?
A lot of chronic pain, really flaring up. This is ridiculous, but I had this burlap pillow that I bought at the Goodwill that was helping me when I would be driving in my car. And I think it fell out at some point when I got out of the car. It said #1 teacher on it. It was really hideous and made out of burlap, but it did help my back. So now I guess I'm on the hunt for a little tiny pillow, or maybe I'll duct tape together like a tea towel or something. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Tired, no days off in the foreseeable future. I'm working really closely in reparational peer support relationship with someone who needs a lot of support. He's another artist. I love him so much. I want to make sure that he gets the best care that he possibly can have. And right now that means me showing up to make it happen because there's gaps in his coverage and things like that. So it's been hard, but it's also been rewarding because I feel the trust building between us. I feel him testing boundaries and doing the things that we who are mentally ill, because I'm also mentally ill, these kinds of cycles that we play out in our lives over and over again. And we're bumping up against those things, but so far so good. And there's some hope on the horizon in terms of outside help. And so knowing that there's progress, and knowing that he's feeling satisfied for the most part and happy in recovery is just huge to me. So that's been a huge relief, honestly, as hard as I've been working lately with him. And I luckily have a place to live. My cat got very sick, but then got better. So there's that little monster over there. So, I mean, things are all right. I live in someone else's basement, and, I'm comfortable in my role as people under the stairs. So there's that.
Okay, Abby, how are you showing up today?
I'm doing okay. It was a little bit tired, but a little bit frustrated by work, but overall I can't really complain too much. Like this, under the circumstances, I am pretty lucky for what's going on for my life. So that's where I'm at.
Good. Hi, Jen. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you showing up today?
I don't even know what that means.
Right?
So first of all, hi Reed. It's so good to see you in person-ish. Today was long. It was a real Monday, like a lot of Mondays all in a row. But I guess it went okay. there was a local Zoom. So there's like a local eviction fund that I started with one of the organizers here. And that has been a kind of ongoing shit show. Not because of her, she's awesome, just because everything else. But we had a meeting that felt really good. And I think we're going to continue to improve. Like, I think we have some strategy that's kind of encouraging. So I'm hoping. I just found out about the Supreme Court's fuckery and the healthcare fuckery that is supposed to start like next week or whatever. So that's awesome. That's really great.
Shit.
Yeah. So awesome. Fun. Really good. And then also I'm just rambling now, so I'll shut up in like 2 seconds. But also on the meeting, we found out that we're not even going to get the results from the election until like 2 weeks later, maybe. So
at least.
Right? So
I listened to a thing that's
out of tradition.
I listened to this Radio Lab about a simulation that they did where they played the potential outcomes from the election based on, a lot of different factors, but it was basically kind of people who are leaders in policy making and stuff, and they're doing this like a D&D game, rolling 10-sided dice and shit, but fully expect this to go all the way until January at least. Yeah. And honestly, like what we can expect from the right now is some real violence. So, I mean, that's going to play into it too. And that's going to be pretty fucking grim.
It's grim, and there's trainings cropping up all over, which are great. We should have them, and people who need them should have them. Like, we need that type of training to happen to protect ourselves. But like, it's fucking scary. So, yeah. But hopefully the strategy we thought of in this Zoom will be really good. I'm sorry. You should just skip me. I'm done. I'm shushing now.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah, this is going to be a really fun conversation. So, Reed, if you would just start with a little bit of your background, like how you came to anti-racism work, and all that.
Well, I guess like for a long time, I thought that anti-racism was sort of an intellectual exercise, almost like a battle I was playing out within myself. It didn't manifest as work necessarily, except for like arguments with other people or trying to convince other people of things, and also trying to learn. And one of the first platforms I accessed was LiveJournal, and I can't remember the name of the group, but the subtitle of the group was Beyond White Guilt. And there were a lot of people who were forward thinking. And I mean, I showed my ass a bunch of times, like really just like said things that now I'm just humiliated that I said, showed my privilege in a way. But I was really lucky that some people did take the time to say, well, maybe it's not a big deal to you that someone said they were going to attack a primary school and kill Black children, but their parents here worried about their children, and like it wasn't abstract anymore. Like I remember that so clearly. I was living in another friend's basement. Now it's, fucking more than 20 years later, and I'm still living in a basement talking about how racism is wrong. But I was learning more then about how racism was wrong. And I did learn then at a certain point, just shut the fuck up. Not everything's for you. You don't have to like your Black friend's post about it or say some performative bullshit. It's not really, I mean, obviously you want to support your friends, but there's a way that white people do that is so unsupportive. And, there are multiple ways in which that I do experience, like I experience extreme mental illness. Like I've been institutionalized against my will a bunch of times. I'm transgender, and I've been poor since I reached age, pretty much, so it's like, and I'm 44 years old. So, I don't know, like I feel like those ways that I experience oppression do give me a lens and just like a real gut feeling in a lot of situations that seem to be missing for a lot of people that don't experience things like that very much, or just like, no, I'm a woman in Trump, and it's just like, yeah, okay, yeah, all right. RBG. Like, I'm sorry, but like, you know, there's people out there who've done far more than capitulate to the culture at large in the service of a single. There are more radical people than Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I can put it that way. And people more worth listening to and paying attention to, and not maybe not lionizing. I don't know how healthy that is, but like, you know, you see all those Che Guevara t-shirts. What the fuck is that doing for anybody? You know what I mean? Like, so whatever. I don't know what I'm talking about.
I love you so much. So how long have you been in Louisville? Because I know that you've lived other places.
Yeah, I grew up here. We came here when I was like 9. And that was a weird experience. It was a hard adjustment for our family. But then, you know, I kind of learned to hate Louisville, and I still kind of hate it. Like, I can't get away, but I hate it. I spent 5 years in Buenos Aires at a certain point, I think starting in 2006 or 7. And I stayed there for like 5 years. That was really eye-opening. It was really good for my mental health. Yeah, it changed my life. But yeah, I've been back here ever since. And so when I first started to show up for stuff and realize that I could show up for stuff was the summer that Philando Castile and Alton Sterling were murdered. And there was such a sense of urgency inside me, and I didn't know what to do. And I didn't have any money, so I'm a leather worker, so I made some bracelets, and I figured I could make these bracelets and I could donate the money to Black Lives Matter. And so ahead of that event, I started to try to sell those, and then showed up for that event and gave Chanel and Jason each a bracelet to introduce myself and say thank you, and I'm gonna be raising some money with this so I can be in touch with that. And then it was pretty full on from then. Pretty quickly I got pulled into L-Surge. It really turned out that group wasn't a good fit for me. Now I'm kind of on my own. And I've been really spotty in my work and inconsistent. And I think that is bad in a lot of ways. But what's good about what I do and have done, I think, in terms of anti-racism is to bring anti-racism into almost every space that I interact with people in. So I do stand-up comedy, or I did before COVID-19. Hopefully I will do it again. I love it, but I haven't been able to do much of it. And yeah, I brought that into these conversations with comedians. And I'm not, saying that I did anything that special. To me, that is the bare minimum of what we can do. But when we do that, we lose social credibility among other whites because, and I just actually listened to White Fragility with Beverly, from the book by Beverly D'Angelo. And she's great. Like, she's very fun to watch too. If you don't have time to read a book, just look up any video where she's talking about it, because she's very entertaining, very personable. She's done this work as an educator for many years, and she knows how to make jokes about it and deal with white people and other white people, because she herself is also white. I mean, I would like to know how much of the proceeds of her book go to reparations, but that's a question for another day. But I guess I was getting to a term that she was using, and now I can't remember what term. It wasn't white fragility. I can't remember. Well, whatever.
Can you describe the term?
No, because I don't remember what the point I was making was. Yeah.
That's totally fine. So how long have you been working with Chanel? Do you know?
Well, that was when that started, Then when I got the money, I met up with Chanel, and then, sometimes I would drive her around or do things like that. It seemed like something was always going wrong, like I was getting a flat tire, or like there was all this shit where just like, oh, my car won't start. Hang on. Oh, maybe this guy in the Home Depot parking lot can give us a jump. That kind of stuff. And I think the reason that I don't know, like I've known other people who work closely with Chanel who have had conflict, but my approach was always just like to recognize my position in the relationship. Like, you know, who is fortunate enough to be there as direct support, to give a ride to someone whose sister was killed by corrections officers. Like, you have the opportunity to directly assist or serve a person who could use a ride, and all it takes is getting up a couple hours early and doing that. Like, it just felt to me like I feel like such a grunt in so many ways in general. Like, I'm happy tinkering and putting things together. Like, I can see myself being like an old apartment super or something in about 20 years, just like pretending to scratch balls that I don't have or whatever. I don't know. But like, I'm just like, I don't know. I just like, I like to be able to put my hands to the work, really, because that's how it feels tangible and real. Put my body in spaces and, you know, recognize when I'm in a Black space, what a privilege that is to be allowed into that space and to treat those spaces accordingly, because radical Black spaces are not for white people. And if you're there at all, you're fucking lucky. Like, quit being a baby and take the fucking trash out. You know what I mean? Like, duh. Oh, you're not supposed to say duh. I'm sorry. Sorry. See, nobody's perfect.
So you have already talked a little bit about it, but I know that a lot of people find working with Chanel really difficult and find themselves in conflict with her. And I think that, you know, and you've been in Chanel spaces as long as, like, as soon as I came on the scene and started doing more on the ground stuff, like I've always seen you as well. Like you've been there as long as I've been there. And I think that we have really similar ways of interacting with Chanel, and which is, you know, like you said, to just recognize, you know, when you're on a ride along with Chanel, that you're watching radical Black organizing take place, like you're watching it happen and unfold, and that's such a privileged space to be in. What do you have to say, you know, about working with Chanel? And well, we'll just start there. What do you have to say about working with Chanel?
I mean, Chanel's a force. Chanel is to be admired. Chanel is to be reckoned with, right? And I think that when you understand that as a white person, if you're working with Chanel, like, you're getting an opportunity to see how the work moves, really to see how busy she is. And I don't understand how she keeps it going, because like 1/5 of the stuff that comes her way would send me into the madhouse again. Like, I really would be institutionalized with that much on my shoulders. I would break. Like, I don't. And so, you know, like, I think it would be really easy I could just imagine scenarios with so many of the people that I encounter, white people that I encounter in this work, where someone is going to feel disrespected because it's like, well, I'm driving you around all day and you haven't said 2 words to me. It's not a social occasion, you know. She could drive herself if she didn't have to be on her phone like 23 hours out of the day. Like, you know, like, what do you think is happening here? You're here to serve, right? And you're serving the movement or you're serving a person in that movement. I mean, the work is personal. As long as I feel like I've been invited and allowed into these spaces, you know, with like Occupy ICE and other things like that, where, you know, there's stuff happening, there's real concerns, there's real people's lives on the line. You have to think about it. And so if I can only show up and like really look, because of my years in food service, at the situation in the kitchen tent and say, someone could get food poisoning if this continues. Let's try to systematize this, and come back the next day and say, okay, someone could get food poisoning, so let's try to systematize this, and then come back the next day and say, okay, someone could get food poison, so we should systematize this, and then like the next day and the next and the next, and really have the job just be like making sure to get the stuff out, making sure someone else is there to get the stuff out, because nobody's going to follow these rules. Nobody's going to listen to stuff they don't know. They didn't get the message. They're wandering through whatever. They don't read signs. They don't like to be told what to do by a sign. I don't know, like, why people, but the reality in that situation was mostly this was a problem with white people coming in and feeling like everything was theirs to touch, handle. You know, I brought this in, let's move this stuff, without asking anyone else around, where does this go? Or do you know who, you know, being organized about it, right? And so even with something like that, there are systems in place in anti-racist work that I know nothing about as a white person, as a person who would be a member of Stand Up Sunday because I'm white, not Black Lives Matter because white people can't be in Black Lives Matter. You know, just knowing that, like being aware of that. And there was definitely times where I wasn't aware of it. Like I was around in these spaces, so I was like, I'm part of Black Lives Matter. Well, and then I, you know, how long did it take me to understand? And nobody corrected me either. So it's up to me to like later on just be like, whoops, okay, well, I was saying a thing that wasn't exactly right. I don't know how to go back and correct it because time travel's not a thing. So from this, you know, moving forward, I have this understanding, and that's really how, and that's how you progress in the work, because every step of this can be really humiliating. You know, some of the thoughts you have about your own importance, and then realizing, no, like, no, you're coming from a white supremacist system. You have these programmed ideas in your head about hierarchy, or about like systems and how they should work, or efficiency, or whatever the fuck you think you're bringing. You know, so many people come to this work and their first thing is, listen to me, listen to what I thought of, listen to, you know, no, you listen. Like, you have a lot to learn and you have an opportunity, so listen and then help, then do something. That's all there is to do, you know?
Yeah. So a little bit before we started, I told you that the idea for this roundtable came about because, you know, we have a group of about 500 members, and it's the same group of maybe, I don't know, what would you all say, like 20, 30, 40 of us? Just as 5 of us, doing the work, actually implementing the work. And oftentimes for that work to move, it's really our admin team that really does the bulk of the work. And I think there are maybe 7 or 8 of us. And I say us, but I'm technically supposed to have stepped down from an admin role. And so has he, Jen, but also like noticing how the work doesn't move, or moves so slowly. And we get all of these excuses. And I said to you, you know, I feel bad saying it's excuses because I know that everybody's having a really rough time. Like 2020 has kicked everybody's ass. And I want to understand that. And I want to be, you know, I want to be aware and sensitive to that. I want to build a community where people don't think that they're going to be disposed of because they just don't have it today. But at the same time, it's just not a sustainable thing. Like, we cannot keep going like this. A lot of the reasons that Heejin and I stepped back, and I only speak for Heejin because we've had these conversations, but is because of burnout, because it's just too much for, you know, such a small group to hold all that's being asked of us. And so we started talking about, you know, how do we move people from this, you know, like, okay, anti-racism is this ideology, it's this, you know, sort of academic like concept to intellectualize and discuss, and it's a label that we can put on ourselves to feel better about ourselves and the place that we hold in all of it. But in terms of getting to a place where it's just part of your personal individual praxis and taking that into every space that you're in, and doing that regardless of whether or not you have money, regardless of whether or not you are being mistreated in spaces, for whatever reason. How do we make,
right?
huh?
Or you believe you are. I mean, I think.
Or you believe you are.
Right. When we're talking about white people, a lot of people have a very high standard for how they will be treated, right? And that whole attitude is really, especially if you're in a Black space, flat out racist. That's what it is, because it's not a white space, right?
Yeah. So how do we make that? How do we help people make that intrinsic shift that has to happen from, oh yeah, I'm anti-racist, I give $25 to Reparations Roundtable every month, to like, this is who I am and what I do and how I move through space?
Yeah, I think, well, one thing I think is perfectionism is playing into this a lot when it comes to white people, right? Like, someone like you, and you have said to me, like, I feel so bad, I'm not doing anything. And I'm just like, Rosie, like, you can't walk right now because you've done so much. So maybe you're doing enough. Like, feel pretty sure you're doing enough. I think you might even be doing a little too much. Like, but not to be appropriative with my speech or anything. So, I mean, the thing is, like, we're going to do this imperfectly. We're going to do it the way we do it. And I feel like when it comes to asking white people for money, and I know with the posts that I've shared with Reparations Roundtable stuff, like, there is a real dearth of engagement. A lot of my anti-racist stuff doesn't get a lot of my signal boosts. They don't get the boosts, right? They don't get the posts, they don't get the likes or whatever reaction. Okay. And so it feels ineffective sometimes, right? And it feels like it's not working. But then I talk to people sometimes who are like, they never like a post. They never tell me that they contributed anything. They never post about their contribution. However, they will say to me, I always pay attention to what you're saying. I trust your opinion, your thoughts on this, because I know that you pay attention and you study this and you care. Like, if I have money to give, I always look at your page first to see what you're saying for people to give to, right? And even one person telling me that means that there are other people out there. I think part of what happens with anti-racist work is that you're dealing with your other white friends who are in your circle or whatever, and they're cowards. They're more cowardly than you are. And if you're not even managing to do anything but maybe post something once a week, you're a coward too. And I'm sorry to say it, but this work takes fucking whatever bulbous genital you think it might, because you've got to do it. You got to say it. You got to keep saying it. I can't tell you how many people I know I have affected their point of view simply by being a haranguing pain in the ass like I always am, right? Like, not everybody's style is that, but find your style, because your style is relevant to spreading news, to spreading information, to spreading perspective. You've got your style, but you've got to figure out what your style is without bringing your tears into it, right? Because nobody needs white tears about racism. I'm sorry. If you might need to shed them, but you're going to shed them in front of another white person, okay? Do it like that. I mean, I can't cry anymore, so that's a different problem. But it's a different problem to have. But just like understand with a boldness. And I really feel fortunate because working around Chanel did impart a lot of boldness to me. I see the way that she demands space. She demands people listen. They don't like it, right? They might feel confused by what she said and they don't understand it totally. And so what they feel toward her is anger. And I'm not saying she enjoys other people's anger, but I'm saying that she tolerates that shit in whatever ways she needs to keep making the work happen. You cannot do this work and be a coward, right? And you've got to think of the ways that you can be brave. And even if they're small ways, like recently I was at a chain store. I won't advertise for these pieces of shit, but I was in a chain store and there was an elderly Black woman behind me in line. And then there was this really dolled up princess of a white tattooed hipster woman who tried to cut this woman in line behind me. Now, I actually didn't see this woman in line behind me, but when she said, "You're cutting in line," I looked, and then the woman was just like, "No, I didn't." And I was like, "Yeah, you did," because part of this work is backing up Black people who are receiving racism on any level that you encounter it. Is it at the store? Fucking say something. Do you think that white woman was going to fight me? I can tell you what, she was a coward and she was not about to do that. She wanted to yell at this Black woman about her attitude, a woman 40 years her senior at least. I said, have some respect. And she wrote because she looked at my eyes to get me to side with her on cutting this. Why do you want to cut an old Black lady in line? What's wrong with you? You don't think a 60, 70-year-old Black lady's been through enough? You're going to fucking cut her in line and give her a bunch of lip? Fuck you. No. And I'm not going to stand there and listen to it. And I'm not going to be party to it, And that's, in my opinion, what it takes, even if you had to interrupt in a different way than I did, because I'm an asshole. Maybe you're not an asshole. Nobody said you had to be, okay? I'm sorry.
You're fine. I just lost my cigarette. Does anyone have any questions?
But we can be assholes if we want to be. Just want to verify that's.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Totally acceptable.
Well, to other white people, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Hopefully it doesn't burn my car down because I can't find it. We'll just start another one. Everything's fine.
So jealous. I want one really bad.
The carpet will put it out.
There you go.
Because that's how fire works.
It'll just get bored and stop. It's fine.
It'll just get bored and stop. So yeah, I mean, I feel like we've tried, a diversity of tactics, and in Roundtable, we do have all of the, super feely unpacking posts. Part of the point of the group was to provide a space where white people were unpacking their bullshit with other white people so that it wouldn't disrupt BIPOC spaces. So we do have that. We've also had a couple of, really, I've done a couple of lives in the group where I've been like, I mean, this is the work, stop being cowards. You have to do this work. You have to show up and do the thing. We've had quizzes. We've put up posts for like non-monetary reparations and the different ways that people can show up. Also sort of trying to teach people that it's not just about money, and that if you don't have access to financial wealth, like that's not an excuse not to be part of the work. And it just doesn't seem to be motivating people. And I know that that's really any anti-racist space. We have our fair share of, we have our fair share of those spaces in Louisville.
And people don't like to be told that they're not doing enough, like they get offended.
Yeah.
And on some level, I get that. But on another level, look, if you said you're part of this organization, maybe you just look at this as like another hobby group. Like I follow bands on Facebook or something. It's just something that I look into casually sometimes, when a post pops up in my feed. I think asking people how they show up every day, I think even like maybe even looking for ways that people show up that are different, like asking them for their creativity, because I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's hard to engage people, right? And I feel like I lose hope a lot of times when I'm just trying to post for raising money and I'm getting no kind of reaction at all. So I feel like it doesn't make a difference if I don't do this, because nobody's gonna get anything out of it, and I'm just gonna have a dead post on my page that nobody interacts with. But I think the consistency is part of what makes it meaningful to your circle, and especially if it's the only statement that you're making, that white people need to we need to give money for reparations. We need to make it happen. We need to start trying to make things right within our own communities. And what we can do toward that end is something to even out the economic disparity, even if it's just for one family to get one meal a month or something, right? Like you've got to make it add up to something. And the way you do that is showing up when you're supposed to show up and doing what you said you were going to do. I have a lot of, I have a group to support the guy that I'm a peer support for, right? There's almost 500 people in that group. Not one single person has been able to show up in more than a week to give me a bit of a break. And so like, if I have to work or something, then I go to him before I go to work. I go to work, then I go back to him, and then I go home. And it's really hard, right? And it's harder than it needs to be because I don't have any tangible support in the real world. And while I do appreciate people's financial contribution, and a lot of people in the group express, well, that's the least I can do. It really fucking is the least you can do. It really is. Because I live so uncomfortably, and I have for so fucking long. Like, to me, the idea of knowing that I would be able to give $25 at a week or at any given time or a month or whatever, like, it's really not a thing that I can say, yes, I can do this. But, my blood, sweat, and my apparent permanent lack of tears tell a different story, I can feel good that I'm not ignoring the needs of a human being. I can feel good that, you know, I can interrupt various forms of medical and psychological abuse, and you know, it's tangible and it's real. And I think a lot of people who are white and doing this because they're working in an anti-racist way, and that's the motivation for their work, we miss that sense of satisfaction for the most part in this work. But we have to recognize that that's not what the fucking work is about. We're not supposed to feel satisfied. Yes, it's a disaster. And part of the reason that it's a disaster is because white people won't take any responsibility for the systems that privilege us. It's not a real problem until we're uncomfortable. And when we're uncomfortable, then it's a fucking problem. And we need to disrupt that. We need to change our idea. Comfort it doesn't need to be at the top of the list. You know, we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Well, within that is interpersonal relationships, you know, meaningful relationships. If the only meaningful relationships that you have are with white people, something's really wrong with your fucking life. I mean, it is. Like, you are in a bubble, and that bubble was engineered. And as long as you stay in that bubble, you are participating fully and fully enjoying white supremacy culture. And that's the reality. If you're never uncomfortable, if you're never in spaces where you feel that you're the racial minority, or you have to watch your mouth because you don't want to say the wrong thing, and you get tongue-tied and freaked out and scared that you're going to come off like a total douche, then you're fucking doing it wrong. You need to be in those spaces. And if you can't be in those spaces, you need to be giving 25% of your fucking income to reparations, like immediately. Like, I know a lot of people are poor, and that's not a possibility. And I'm joking, and I am, you know, hoping to get subsidized housing soon. So we'll see how that goes. But
yeah, so I want to speak to, you know, one of the, like I said before we started, one of the reasons that I thought that you in particular were a good person to reach out to have this conversation is because you do have so many intersections to your social location that are, you know, excuses that we hear all the time, you know, and so as
crazy.
Somebody, huh?
I'm too trans.
You're too trans. You're too crazy. You're too poor to show up. So, like, you know, what can you say as somebody who, you know, who is trans and who is, you know, mentally ill and has been institutionalized and is poor? How do you keep going? I mean, you're battling so much as an individual.
I mean, the thing is, sometimes I don't, right? Like, sometimes all I can do is just try to keep up with what's happening. Like, try to boost a little bit of what's happening, even when I can't be there myself, right? It means tapping into my local organizations that are Black and Indigenous people of color led, right? Not my white organizations that are watering down a message for me to feel comfortable with. That's not what the work is about, right? You need to be tapped in. You need to follow Black media. You need to make it a priority to continue to keep up with the way that the language changes and the way that we discuss things like gender, disability. I mean, people are really falling down on the job when it comes to disability justice language, disability justice of any kind. And, you know, disabled people are facing a potentially huge crisis, even more so than already, especially when it comes to like the kinds of aid that people can get, or getting connected to resources and in a timely way that could like make it possible to live, like that kind of thing. And we always, as white people, have to understand that as bad as those things feel to us, there are people who are Black and there are people who are Indigenous or undocumented people who would love to be worried about losing health care because they don't fucking have it and they can't get it, right? So I see people out there bemoaning their situation, other white people bemoaning, you know, the calamity that is the Supreme Court or the federal branch of our government. But the fact is, as bad as it is, it's always been that bad. And the fact that you are going to use this as an excuse to feel shitty and not do anything about racial justice just means that you are wanting to hang on to the last vestiges of white supremacy culture that you can get before the boogaloo strikes. And I got to tell you, it's not a good look. Get a gun. Okay? Don't know what I'm talking about anymore.
But I do think that's a helpful.
I shouldn't say that publicly. I have tons of guns. I have a lot of them. Don't fuck around with me.
But I do think that's a helpful reframe. You know, Heejin talks about that a lot. Like, do we need a reframe around this? And I do think that's a helpful reframe for folks to think about, you know, when you are feeling really overwhelmed because of shit going on in your life, think about how much more overwhelm that would cause, you know, somebody who is BIPOC, or one of our BIPOC mages that we are supporting. You know, you're in relationship with someone every day who, if they didn't have access to XYZ or something broke, you know, like their car breaks down, and it's like those types of things that for us are kind of isolated events. Like if our car breaks down, you know, we just have to fix our car. But for a lot of folks who are BIPOC and BIPOC mages, it's like that just all of the chips sort of fall, because then suddenly they don't have transportation to get to work, and then they lose their job, and then, you know, that means they've lost their income to be able to keep up with payments, and it all falls down so quickly and so rapidly that it does just create a completely different experience. And so reframing your overwhelm to think like, you know, if I were Black, this would be happening, or, you know, this would be affecting so many other areas of my life, where for us it can live as a, like an isolated event.
And I think like, so there you have this dichotomy, right? You have this person feeling like their posts aren't getting enough likes, so it's not worth doing. That's the level of hardship, is no likes on your post. Compared to somebody whose whole family doesn't have a fucking place to live, and, you know, someone in the family has a chronic illness and they might fucking die, and nobody can get any nutritious food. So how the fuck can anyone get any rest? And they're about to get kicked out of their house and the electricity got cut off and everyone's fucking freezing. Have you lived like that before? You didn't get enough likes on your post? I'm sorry. But if that post is like everything that you're doing for racial justice, then you better fucking post it. Like, you better at least do that, right? Like, and I really think that doing the work, thinking about the work, reframing your life so that even like when I'm posting on Facebook, there's so many whiny baby things that I could fucking post about how bad I feel about this or that. But I recognize that among my friends list and people who pay attention to me are a lot of Black radical thinkers. I'm not going to be one of these white people ignoring that section of people on my list and posting about my little hard luck bullshit. Like, this is, it contextualize, anti-racism contextualizes everything in my life. And whether or not I'm able to get up that day and do something tangible that I can feel like did good in the community. I know that in my life, my trajectory in my behaviors is toward justice, is toward racial equity. I am doing what I can do as a white person. And that makes me feel way less like a complete piece of shit. And I don't know if that's worth it, but like, it is part of how I have any self-esteem as a human being, right? Because when you are studying anti-racist work and all the things inside your head told you something different than what you're learning, and you feel so intensely uncomfortable and out of place and not sure what to say, that is the work, right? Because you have to recontextualize the entire fucking world around you, because you've been brainwashed in a white supremacy culture, you know. I think that if it doesn't feel like enough to post, then do more, but at least do that, right? So maybe it feels useless, and we can all talk about how many things. I mean, I can't tell you like how many times like somebody hit me up for a press release. Oh, I got up off my ass. I fucking, you know, labored over it, my wording and this and that and this and that. And then I don't think anyone ever sent out like probably 15 or 20 press releases that I wrote, you know? But guess what? I'm white. And guess what my ancestors didn't have to do? Fucking die in chattel slavery. Yeah. So if some of my precious press releases didn't get released, like, I'm sure that there are people who would leave an organization over a thing like that because their work isn't. But sometimes it's pointless. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes people are really scrambling trying to get something done, and then the thing doesn't pop off, it doesn't happen, or whatever reasons there are. Those aren't up to me to wonder. Like, I know when somebody asked me for, or I've said that I would produce something, that I did what the fuck I said I would. So even if those press releases didn't amount to a hill of beans, they did show that I was someone who was trustworthy, and that I wasn't doing this with my vanity so wrapped up in the work that I was going to make a fucking issue because I felt like my work was wasted, right? I think you have to recontextualize it. What's my work worth? It's worth what the fuck it's worth, but we don't even get to determine that, right? That's not even up to us. Like, you being consistent makes, you know, your cousin Janet off in South Dakota think about something differently. She never tells you that, right? You being consistent, at least in some very minor obligations, just be serious about it. If you said you were going to do it, then just do it, because that's the least that you can do. If you say you're going to do it and then you don't do it, all you do is feel bad about yourself and think about how you didn't do it and how you should have done it and how you would have done it and how you could have done it. And so let's not play like that's not part of what's going on here too. Are you torturing yourself because you didn't make that fucking post? Why didn't you make that post? Well, Friday was really hectic. So what about making sure your post is ready to go on Wednesday? If you need to add a link later, that's an easy thing. When you have a few minutes taking a shit on the toilet and you can write it up, you know, because the baby's crying in the other room or whatever. Thank God I don't have any kids, you know, but I don't know what I could do if I had kids. jump off, I don't know. Jump off of something, run away. I don't know.
Hide in the bathroom.
Be a good absentee dad. What?
I was gonna say, hiding in the bathroom is a valid parenting technique. I will just say, like, totally, right? Yeah.
True.
Get it done. Commit to 10 minutes a week, and then and then start thinking what else you can do. Because
A friend of
making
mine-
a post isn't going to be satisfying to you as a person.
So a friend of mine had a really good way. I think her list was also people she was trying to pull more and more into the work. And she is also somebody who is, I guess, kind of new to it and is, you know, maybe getting more and more involved as she goes as well. And what her thing was, the way she said it was, figure out what your baseline is. Where are you and what are you doing? Figure that out. Don't judge, just assess. Like, this is where I am. This is what I'm doing. And then she says, and every day, try to raise your baseline a little bit.
Or maybe every week, right?
Right. Like, what, you know, but like, don't stay stuck. Like, figure out where you are and move.
Be intentional about it.
Yep.
Be real, budget time.
But it's good. I liked that reframing because it implies a sort of deliberate honesty in reflection that I think often lacks when non-Black folks are doing anti-white supremacy work. Because if you cannot reflect where you are and what you're doing, if you cannot really see how you're showing up and be honest with what that looks like and the impact it has, then it doesn't matter what other more things you do or what other things you don't do, because your assessment of where that work goes and where that energy is put is not honest. So I liked it because it was like, take a look at what you're doing. Like, just observe what you're doing. It's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I mean, and I think radical honesty is such a difficult thing for, you know, those of us who have been raised in white culture. Radical honesty is like non-existent, right? We have these very surface level fake relationships with each other. And so these concepts of, you know, building community or thinking, you know, of other people outside of the frame of how can I save them, but how can I actually help them? Or even radical honesty are all things that we're just not taught to practice. And so it does require a lot of unpacking and a lot of self-reflection and a lot of doing that. And I think that if you're doing that work, I think that is part of the work. But there's no reason you can't do that and move at the same time. I think those of us who are afraid to do both is because, well, I don't have my head wrapped around this conceptually yet. I haven't internalized this yet. And so if I show up, I'm going to show up messy, and that might cause harm. And I think that speaks to the perfectionism we were talking about earlier, you know, that we expect that we're going to be able to show up and be perfect at this and get our cookies and then go home. And it's just really not how it works. So I do think that it takes a lot of self-reflection, unpacking, processing, whatever. And at the same time, you're doing the work, because what are you really processing or unpacking if you're not doing the work?
What do you really have to know but to be humble? What do you really have to know? If you ever worked a service job, if you ever answered phones in a call center, you fucking understand what it takes and what you need to bring to this work. You're coming in as service personnel. You are service personnel. Think of yourself that way and act accordingly. It really isn't that big of a mind fuck. Now, maybe you'll feel weird about some goofy remark you made or trying to be cool or whatever, but really that's just neither here nor there. Being there and doing the work is what matters. Trying to do better is what matters, because nobody's perfect and nobody comes to this work perfect and nobody ends up perfect from doing this work. You know, perfectionism is out the window. And I think the word that I was trying to remember earlier, the term was white solidarity. And breaking white solidarity is what you need to do. You need to do it everywhere you go, right? You need to take it with you into the spaces like the fucking country club, if you're one of the people who has one of those, to Sunday dinner, to church. You need to take it with you. You need to break white solidarity, because that is what it takes to break down racism. And so when you post your reparations roundtable post, it's white solidarity that keeps your friends list from interacting with that post. That's the reality. That's why that silence is there. That is what you face. But all you're doing is being a white person fighting for something that doesn't affect your life directly. So why is it such a big deal to you if people don't interact with it, right? Maybe the question is, I want people to interact with this more. What can I do? Like Rosie will dye her hair when she's drunk in front of everybody because that's what the fuck it occurred to her to do. And she does it. Like, maybe that's not your style, but what is your style, right? And I think it's very important to start trying to recontextualize your life with the understanding that you need to break white solidarity. You can't just let these comments people make pass by. You can't be at work and have a Black coworker who's being treated with disrespect and then privately tell that person how sorry you are that other people are treating them like that. You're not doing anything when you do a thing like that, but to put the onus on that Black person to say to you, it's okay that you're not interrupting that racism. I see that you're a good person. That is not the work. That is not the work. There's no Black person that needs a white person to tell them that they understand fucking shit. It means dick. It means possum anus. It means nothing. Like, nobody cares. It doesn't matter. You're not helping. You're making yourself feel better, and you're coming at work with a place of vanity as a white person, and that is not the work. The work is to break white solidarity. And if the only way you can do that is by posting one post a week saying we need to give money to this family because they need this money more than you, then do it. I could be better with my posting. So if anybody is watching this and they're like, well, I've never seen Greg, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you've never seen it. Sorry. I'm doing a lot of other things, and I joined Reparations Roundtable to support, and then I was supposed to be an admin, and then I just like disappeared. Like, imperfect, that's how we do it. If you've missed a bunch of posts for a while, it doesn't mean you can't do it. If you miss it 1 week, it doesn't mean the whole thing needs to be thrown in the shit can, right? It doesn't mean that, right? You're gonna fuck up, you're gonna miss something, you're gonna miss a beat, we're not here to be perfect, right? We're here to keep on doing it and try to move the word. If you can show up in person and do things, great. If you can't and you can get your middle-class white friends to give money, then do it, right? And if you feel like it's not working, just keep doing it. Imagine how, like, I think back about like people being bought and sold as animals in our country, like people being treated that way, people whose whole life got taken away from them. Almost every aspect of their life got taken and stolen and destroyed, their families destroyed, and we're dealing with the fallout from that. It's not over. It's very comfortable to imagine that it's over if you're white, but it's not the reality that we're dealing with here. So, you know, you lose a little bit of social credibility with somebody who, guess what? Is a piece of shit. You lose, if you're losing social credibility with racist pieces of shit. Do you need their social credibility? Do you? Do you really? No, you don't. You don't.
So what is the concept of white solidarity?
White solidarity is just the ways that we ignore racism, right? And so I don't know if Beverly D'Angelo coined this phrase or if that is a part of anti-racist lingo, but that is the crux of this. You know, someone makes, so white solidarity is the reason that I turn, when I get a YouTube commercial, I get a Liberty Mutual ad with like two white people and one black person, and the black guy like is the only one who sounds any good, and everyone looks at him like he farted. It's just like, what is this? Like, this is just, why? Like, was there nobody there that could say, does this seem kind of racist to you? I mean, yeah, we include him. I mean, we laugh at him and stuff for having a personality and everything. Like, what's up with that? No, like, it's a very trivial example, but it's just, we should be past a lot of these things by now. And I think when we center our feelings like of uselessness or hurt feelings or not, you know, doing it right or all these other things, like, but who cares? Who cares if you did it wrong? Like, you did it, right? That's at least something that you can look at and say, I did that. I'm glad I did it. I'll do it again. I can be proud of that, right? I was consistent. I said I would do something and I did it.
Right.
White solidarity, I didn't explain it, did I? I just got off on a tangent. Probably,
You're right. You said it's the ways in which we ignore the racism that's going on around us to
constantly.
Essentially to maintain our comfort, right?
Yeah, and you gotta watch. I mean, I guess the place where you really have to start with it is inside your own head, right? So if you do have the opportunity to be in Black spaces, even if they're not radical Black spaces, you still have the opportunity to not be a douche, right? Like, to not say everything that pops in your head because you're feeling awkward, and then make someone's race the focus of the conversation at every turn, right? Because you're preoccupied with race as a white person and you feel like you don't understand it. A lot of our reaction is to like joke around about race, but it's not necessarily appropriate. Like, you got to dig down and say, what does that joke that I'm saying really mean? How is that going to make this other person feel? If you're worried about how other people are feeling, then you might find yourself as a white person in Black spaces just being a lot quieter, being a lot less emotive. And I am a very expressive person. That's not what the problem is. The problem that I see a lot is white people just taking up so much space. There'll be conference calls, and I know we all need to bring our true selves into this work, but there'll be calls where, you know, it's a mixed group of organizers. And just really always notice very new white people to the work want to just talk about something really trivial for just take up so much time with something that it's just like, call your fucking mom. Nobody cares. Like, what the fuck? Like, you take up less space so that you're not, because everything you do on some level, every inch of space that you're taking up, you might be taking it away from somebody else who feels less comfortable the more some random white person is going on and on. Like, you make it clear that you don't understand how other people feel is what you do when you go in there with your head up your ass, really thinking about yourself. And so if you approach this work thinking, how would this make someone else feel who is impacted by racism, there's a natural shift in your behavior to be more humble, which is the cornerstone, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Is that boring?
Yeah, I don't know. AB. What the fuck is wrong with me? AB, hey Jen.
Yes, Rosie, something. Yeah. this has been great conversation. We've been talking, amongst ourselves a lot in the last couple of weeks about, like accountability, in the group and to our Black organizers. And it's all kind of coming together for me and talking about this in the conversation we're having tonight too, like how we show up and that honesty that's required about, who we are and what we can do and when we can do it, and just honesty with ourselves and each other. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jen, do you have anything to add? Any questions?
I don't have any questions. Thank you so much, Reed, for talking to us for all the reasons. I really appreciate it.
Motor mouth.
No, I like motor mouth. Hi. This is very tangential, which is why I'm hoping I'm waiting till the end of it, right? Like, are we kind of in the wrap-up stage?
Yeah, I'm out of questions and my brain is foggy. So,
Reed, are you cool if I go off on a little side thing based off of something you said?
Yes.
Okay. So very early on, and I really hope I'm remembering things right, but it has been a long day and I've had alcohol, so we'll see. You said, oh, there it goes. Okay, one of the things that I do pretty consistently is that I bring up anti-racism and anti-white supremacy stuff wherever I am, whatever space I'm in, I bring it, I center that work. And I immediately thought, oh, Intrinsic, that makes so much sense. I love that. This is how we make anti-racism work intrinsic, is we bring it up everywhere we are. And I was thinking that it ties into so much of the resistance I see in spaces, because a lot of the hoarding that happens, especially around power and access, is based off of it's fueled by not wanting to bring that work into that space. So one of the first things I remember when I got started being louder about it, one of the first things I did was I made sure that I did this work with my other work, with the work that I do, with music, with practicing, with friendships. Like it's part of it now. Like that has to be a part of that relationship, or it's not an honest relationship for me. So when I teach, part of that work is to include anti-racism information about it. Part of that work is to reframe an opera, or to point out all the reasons it's problematic, or to point out what parts of history we're missing because of it being famous. Like all of that stuff is really wrapped in there. And what it did for a while was really terrible and pretty typical of white supremacy, was I lost a lot of work, I lost a lot of respect. But on the flip side of that is I now work in spaces where I can be me. I can do the things that I value and that I want to do and that I think are needed and that I believe other folks are counting on to survive. And my work has gotten better because of it. So I feel like, again, it always goes back to this honesty thing, is like, if we're being really honest about what we value, it's going to show in where we put this work. So if we're limiting where we put it, that tells you whether or not it's intrinsic, right? If we're like refusing to put it in certain places, like that says something. And a lot of it was just kind of like a Band-Aid. Like I was terrified of saying this one thing in a workspace, and like, it was like, I'm going to get fired and I'm never going to work again. And then you just rip it off and you say it. Probably I can still play the violin. I mean, I haven't touched it in a few days, so I don't know, but like, probably I can still. So anyway, so that was like, I went on this whole like side tangent. Probably you saw me like fade out.
No,
but
I think
that is, it's so key. Like that whole bring it wherever you are is just so key.
Well,
and it can
there's also the reality. There's also the reality that when you compartmentalize it, you bring so much anxiety and bad vibe and feeling. Everything in your work environment is going to be backwards and wrong. If you're really thinking about anti-racism, and then if you are deliberately compartmentalizing, and I mean like, so your boss said something that was fucked up, or your board is 100% white, or they're tokenizing someone in the space, it needs to be like intentional and deliberate how you proceed. It needs to, maybe you shouldn't fly off the handle in the moment, right? Like maybe you need to talk to the person who's being impacted and say,
right,
you know, I
right,
will, if
for
you
sure.
need me to do something, then I will back you up with HR. I saw what he said, it was wrong. Let me know how I can support you. Like those practices change dynamics, right?
Yeah, thank you for that, Claire. I was only speaking from my own work environments, which it's me and like the student. So like there's nobody, it's just me. But yes, absolutely. You should absolutely be checking in with the people impacted first and foremost. Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I just love that. The thing that you're living as a fragmented person, that's what that brought up for me. Was like, if you believe in this and you really understand this and you're working towards a better understanding of it, then you can't compartmentalize it anymore.
Right.
Because racism, like it blossoms in these compartmentalized situations. It gets worse and worse. You think that it's just a restaurant, or you think that it's just a hotel, or you think that it's just a nonprofit. Why is it so white? Why are the white people in the positions of power? Why does the boss get to treat all the Black employees a certain way and nobody says anything? Like, these are real situations that we come up against every day. And I think the thing to do is make sure that you don't center your feelings. Like I was talking about the example where someone's a boss and then you're like, I saw what he did and it was wrong. I saw what he did and it was wrong, and I will back you up.
Right.
There's a difference. And we're all going to do this imperfectly, but it's not a matter of principle. People's lives are at stake. It is a matter of principle, but it's not just a matter of principle. It's not, you know, white people a lot of times take this work from a point of pride. And if you have your pride wrapped up, you're not going to make it.
If it's a matter of principle, though, like what's the point of a principle if it doesn't have actions? Like, it's not a philosophy class. Like, we're not here to.
Right.
I think, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Abby.
I was gonna say, I'm actually been at this kind of tipping point in my career where I'm feeling like that it's not the right fit anymore. Like I've brought anti-racism into this space, and the reaction has been such the way that it's, and I didn't stop, like I've still kept going, but it just feels like this isn't the right place for me anymore. Like it's time for a change. Like there's some other place I need to be that I'm going to have a larger impact. So I always appreciate all this, like, and read what you said in Heejin too, about like finding that place to be, like bringing this work, having it be intrinsic and bringing that work in, and then finding like an authentic place to work that is, you know, that's going to be better work. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really tough journey. I mean, I was working a couple of years ago, I was working a corporate job. It was my first ever corporate job. And I happened to start that job sort of at the same time that I started my like year-and-a-half stint really being on the ground with Chanel. And it put everything in this perspective that I just couldn't ignore anymore while I was at work. And it was like everything that came out of somebody's mouth, every decision we made as an office, like I was pushing it back against everything all the time. And it got to a point where they literally just fired me because they were like, you are a lot to handle and you may not be here anymore. And I mean, that was fine. It ultimately was the best thing for me as an individual, because then I was out of a space where I no longer felt, you know, I just didn't have any community there, because it was such a white space and it was such a corporate capitalistic thing. And so it ultimately it was fine. And I'm very privileged, and my husband makes enough money that it was not a huge loss for us. So it was totally fine. And there's a lot of privilege wrapped up in being in a position where I could push back and potentially lose my job. But I think you're right. You can't compartmentalize anymore. If you're truly adopting this as like praxis, like there is no other option but to move through space, calling it out everywhere you go, and with every conversation that you have. And I also really think that in terms of understanding what intrinsic anti-racism means, taking it everywhere you go was amazing. And I think also saying racism contextualizes everything that I do, everything that I'm a part of. So anything that happens to me in my life, you know, I'm contextualizing it from the perspective of like, yeah, this really sucks, but if I was Black, this would ruin my life. And that's just a different, you know, that's just a different thing to think about. And so I really liked both of those, taking it everywhere you go, and you know, racism contextualizes everything that I am a part of. I think those are really good ways to begin that process. And I've been very vocal over the years about, you know, that process does start internally and with examination. And I'm hearing from you, Reed, that you did a similar thing to me, that you put yourself in like these online spaces and learned a lot first. And of course, I did the same thing. I said really shitty things. I asked questions that were incredibly triggering. And I was very fortunate that I had people who would hold my hand through that process. I got my ass handed to me a number of times. But I think that when you start that internal journey of being radically honest with yourself, like Jen was saying, and where you are and assessing where you are, and if you're brave enough to show up to a space and get it wrong, then you're going to learn so much. And so I really do think that's where it starts. And I think that if you're doing that, you're starting the work. But again, there's just no reason that you can't do that and do the work at the same time, because nobody's requiring you to be perfect anywhere. In fact, perfectionism is a pillar of white supremacy, and we're actually asking you to not do that, to show up messy. And so, you know, we have, you know, and you spoke to like the cute, cuddly environment that we've created too, like, and I'm thinking about white solidarity in terms of that too, and some of the ways in which our space is problematic, because I think that it's built such a community around the white folks, and we hold each other in such great community, but do we hold, you know, our Black organizers in that community? Do we hold our BIPOC mages in that community? Probably not, and definitely not as well as we're doing with each other. But I also think about that. It's like we've created such like a cuddly environment, and you're still not willing to move with us. It's like that wasn't the answer. That's not the problem. And so we have to really be radically honest with ourselves about what that problem is, and how we can show up messy and brave to the process, because the cuddly shit, it didn't work either. So it's not about that, right? It's like, so what else is going on? And I think, you know, Reed, you've said a couple of times, it's like, it's almost like people are just grasping to hold on to white supremacy and, you know, get what they can, squeeze what they can out of it before it's gone. And it's like, are we being radically honest with ourselves that that's what we're doing?
I really think that's what's happening.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, that made perfect sense.
It sounds kind of funny when you phrase it like that, but
it's so true. And I think we all do that in a lot of ways. We hold on to our comfort so tightly, especially in years like this when everything feels so uncomfortable. We're seeing a mass exodus. Like people are just leaving squads and spaces and chats left and right, or committing to work that they then, you know, don't continue to hold left and right, because we're so uncomfortable and we're just wanting to get back to that space of comfort. And so it's like we might dip a toe in every now and then, but then we're like, that's uncomfortable. I'm gonna run back to my white supremacy bubble.
But it might not even be so. I really don't. I think it's more insidious and like under the radar than that. So I think
really?
I don't think these are conscious decisions to do a thing like that. I think it's just easy to let it fall off the radar.
Yeah.
Because it's not how you're living your life, right? And you're not centering the work in any way. And I think you need to be honest with yourself if that's the case, right?
Yeah.
And it's okay to go through that process. It's normal, but and I'm one of the least consistent people that you're ever going to meet. I think that if you ask Chanel what my downfall is, if I could be termed as an organizer, that would be it, because I'm all in and then I'm all the way out. Like,
right.
It's extreme how my involvement varies but I mean, honestly, the way I've been doing things lately, there's recuperation that needs to happen too. And that's real. And so the thing that I'm trying to remind myself of in those times when it's especially difficult for me to show up or be tangibly helpful is to continue to uplift the messages of organizers, continue to let the people ignore my posts about Zoom calls or whatever else. They can ignore it, but I'm not going to stop. And every once in a while, something I say hits or something starts to get attention for one reason or another, and that's great. But that's not the reason that I need to do what I need to do. And I think really looking back at your life when you have a really real awakening to white supremacy culture, when you look back after you've been active for a while, the things that you regret are the things that you didn't do. All that time I could have X, Y, Z, but instead, I wanted to do whatever, right? I needed to relax. I needed this. I was under a lot of pressure. I was having a relationship problem. Dog died. Like, there's all reasons why. But you will, if you look back and say, no, I did that. I showed up. I said I was going to do it, and I at least did that. If I did nothing else, I did what I said I was going to do. Right?
Yeah. It's almost like, what is that book called? Like the 5 Agreements or something. And it's like being true to your word. Like if you're gonna step up and do something, actually follow through with it.
So if it takes planning, if you have to make your post on Monday and it has nothing to do with what the group is posting as a group because you have to do it on Monday, then fucking do it anyway. There's always
right. It's like Reparations Friday is just a way to build community around it, but you can do that shit anytime. And so, yeah, I mean, that brings me to, so we're talking about bring it into every space you go to, racism, contextualizing everything that you do. And then, so really tangible examples for people of how that shows up. It's like, okay, well, if it's, the reason you can't show up is because you have kids or something. It's like, well, first of all, like all of our Zooms are kid friendly. My kid usually interrupts 1,000 times during Zoom calls and everybody loves it. It's a nice moment. We all get to see my beautiful child that I created and it's fine. But then also if it's like, well, I need to spend time with my kids or my family or whatever, it's like, well, that's a space that you can also bring anti-racism. You can bring that to your kids. You can spend time with them, talking to them about anti-racism, about the work that you're doing, about the struggles you're finding yourself going through doing it. It's like open up that line of communication and have those conversations. If it's, because you have an intense workload, it's like bring anti-racism into your workspaces. Have those conversations, with people at work. If you're, it's about reframing. Well, it's about contextualizing everything you do around racism, right? It's reframing your whole existence in space. And so,
but isn't that sort of a natural awakening too? Like when it's inside you and you're in conflict with your environment, you feel that. And if you have any intersection of oppression at all, if you're a woman in the workplace, for example, then, you know, you don't have to work to contextualize that, right? And if you're really thinking about anti-racism, you know when something is wrong that happens in front of you. You know when you look around and you realize that your entire organization, everyone in power is white. So it's about allowing the connections that you're making in your mind to mean something through action of some sort, right? Even if it's just a conversation with your boss saying, you know, why are all the managers in this store white? If you have to bring that to a corporation at this point, then you're working for the wrong fucking corporation. Like, just saying, like, even in a fast food restaurant, they make sure that not all their managers are white, right?
Right.
And so if you're working for any kind of corporation and that there's no racial justice lens, that's a problem. Like, some conversations have to at least be had. Questions need to be asked. Maybe you start with other coworkers saying, you notice this about that? What do you think about that? Like, even if it's not something so brave as approaching your white racist boss, it's worth conversations. Those conversations change people's minds, and the repetition of it does too. You know, a lot of people did not like me before 2020. Some of those people seem to like me somehow a little bit better now. I was right about some things, you know.
Some of this is funny just because of the context of Louisville and Louisville organizing, by the way. And what Reed has had to deal with in being in certain spaces. So yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, thank you so much, Reed, for spending time with us. I think that
having me on.
I think that's a beautiful way to reframe it, so that we can work on this becoming intrinsic for all of us, is take it into every space you're in, contextualize everything in your life through the lens of racism, and that it's a process that is not linear. There's a lot of starts and stops. There's a lot of circling back to square one. There's a lot of, internal work that has to happen, and all of that shit. And repetition is important, like you said. And so, I mean, part of the strategy with Reparations Friday was repetition as well. It's about getting the word out, not as much about raising phenomenal amounts of money, which we've gotten to a point where we are doing that, and that's amazing. And it's making a lot of work a lot easier. But it's not always about those tangible, measurable things either. It's about bringing awareness, and starting conversations too. So I really appreciate you and your time and your energy and efforts. Thank you for everything that you're doing with your on the ground peer support work that you're doing, which is reparations work, by the way. So shut your face that you're not involved in Reparations Roundtable, because you are.
Well,
and
he's not a femme.
True.
He's not a minority gender. He's only just a minority in almost every single aspect. But
I was going to say every other aspect. And no, it's beautiful work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I know that you're not getting the support that you need, and I see you and I hear you.
Oh.
But you are doing really good work.
Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else to say or add?
Thank you all thank you for having me, Rosie. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Jen. It was great to see your all's faces and hear from you.
All right, awesome.
Is there a way we could help get you some support? I mean, we have a bunch of Louisville people in our R Could we?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about this after the group, I think, but for folks who are in Reparations Roundtable, I would encourage you to look on Facebook for our group. The group is called Help for Mark Anthony Mulligan. He's an artist. He's very famous in Louisville. Everybody knows who he is. The support that we need right now is people willing to spend time with Mark. People maybe willing to help with some hygiene duties, because sometimes like he needs to be really careful about bathing and other things where he could hurt himself, because he has some physical problems right now that are like keeping him from doing a lot of things. And so we're working on his health. So there's a routine. Consistency is really important. One of his care workers recently stole several pieces of his art. So we had to let them go. And that was one of the only folks who was showing up at all. So we really need people who are understanding that this is real work. This is necessary work. Shit that needs to happen, but it needs to happen in person. That's the support that we need right now, in person in this COVID-19 time. We've been in basic isolation for about 4 weeks now. The risk is pretty low, and I would ask people to be very confident of their COVID status before entering our space. And I would ask that people would be willing to at least spend time. I mean, even if the shower gets done by me in the morning and I take off, like having somebody there who is willing to entertain and be entertained by him. People who are willing to drive him around, because he loves just looking out the windows of a car. He paints, he does signs and logos, and he's in ecstasy if you take him on 265 for some reason. So we drive on 265 a lot. Share a meal. Like one of our friends brought over some country music. Mark Anthony loves country music. Just brought his computer and some speakers and went into some deep cuts of stuff that I don't know anything about. I have some very basic working knowledge of like early country music, but I don't like much of the rest of it. So like stuff like that he could geek out about. If you're a country music fan, come on, baby, we need you.
Reed, would you be okay if there was also a written post for the space? I'm thinking maybe more folks might see it.
Yeah,
I can definitely engineer that. So I can copy and paste out of our group. Huh?
Well, I'm just saying that we can tag people on it.
yeah.
Well, I'd be very grateful if we could get some fun. And these people need to be fun, okay?
What?
Don't come in there and be a fucking dud, right?
Okay, I don't know.
He's gonna go, hold on, wait a minute. Then he's gonna fart, and then he's gonna go pow, pow, pow. You gotta be ready, and you gotta enjoy yourself. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Don't come in there and be like, farts aren't funny.
Read.
No, farts are hilarious.
Yeah.
You gotta do some fair warning about that farting.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, we'll definitely get a post going for you, Reed, in the group and tag some folks. I know there's a lot of crossover between people who are in your group and Reparations Roundtable, which is the only reason I haven't tried this before, but we can definitely try it and see what happens. And yeah, awesome. Intrinsic anti-racism, you guys.
Yeah, you got to rethink the word can't. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, you can't? You're lying. You're lying. You're lying from white solidarity, and we see you.
All right. Well, I love you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all.
And we'll talk again soon.
Hey, have a good
Bye.
night.
Thank you. Thanks again, everyone.